Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out new episodes of the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. If you missed an episode or want to get more information about the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Nick Cromydas. He's the CEO at Hunt Club, New Coast Ventures, and he was a Forbes 30 under 30. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man, you're doing a lot of interesting things, but maybe before we kind of get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Sure. So I grew up in Glenview, Illinois, which is a suburb in north of Chicago. So it's about 13, 15 miles away.
Okay, so born and raised Chicago. What kind of got you interested in technology and startups early on?
It's a great question. So I think really, if you look back in my background, I was always doing weirdly entrepreneurial things. So, I remember like in kindergarten, I used to trade pictures that I draw for lunch tickets and sort of doing, all sorts of strange things like that. So I think it's the foray into entrepreneurship started at a pretty early age. As I got older, I played college tennis. So I'd always teach tennis lessons on the side. I was always eBaying things. And I think I really fell in love with technology a little bit later in my career when I realized, it's essentially you have distribution and access to anyone at any given point versus traditionally trying to sell somebody or something on a storefront or in where it's very small or intimate or one access. The idea of like that scale and distribution was something that was always really exciting to me as I kind of started to learn and understand technology.
Sure. So you went to university. What did you take at university and why did you decide to take that?
So I went to Vanderbilt University and then I studied corporate strategies and communications. So I doubled and, it's really a lack of not knowing what I wanted to do. I just picked the two things that I thought were interesting. So corporate strategies was, it was a combination of, all sorts of different business courses. So marketing, finance, economics, entrepreneurship, and then communications was, all sorts of different levels of public speaking and history of rhetoric and things like that. So I think the two combine very nicely for a business sort of path. But truthfully, when I chose, I just basically picked out of a hat. Had no clue what I wanted to do.
No, it's interesting, man. Like I love when people are kind of honest about that stuff, right? Because I think there's a lot of people out there that they come out of high school and they're like, I don't really know what I want to do with my career or as a career or, so I think that's interesting. And as we kind of move through kind of your career, I think how you kind of came to where you are now is interesting. So you graduate university, walk me through what you did kind of after that.
Yeah. So my first job out of school, so I played college tennis at university. And so my first job out of school, I actually coached the Northwestern women's tennis team.
Very cool.
in Evanston, Illinois. So yeah, it was great. I mean, it was a really interesting segue into my career because it was something I'd played tennis every day of my life up until 22, and then went and coached my first year and was leading a group of about 12 really high performing young women. We were number one in the country for a portion of the year, won the Big Ten championship. So it was a really interesting kind of start to your career and has nothing to do with what I'm doing today.
Sure. No, that's great. So you did that for a while. You worked at KPMG. You founded a company. Kind of walk me through that whole kind of part of your life up until you decided to found New Coast Ventures.
Yeah. So always wanted to get into consulting.
Okay.
I thought from my understanding of what consulting was, it was a great way to start into your career in business. You'll get to see multiple industries, work on multiple problems, work with clients, learn sort of a very, wide range of skills. So I thought that'd be a great way to kind of launch my career. So ultimately, after Northwestern, I networked my way into a job at KPMG. But the interesting thing is the way that I did that. So it's basically at most of the big four firms or really any big firm, consulting firm, if you don't get hired right out of college, so through their traditional recruiting program, you actually it's really difficult to get a role there.
Interesting.
And so what I did, because they have their training programs, and so generally they hire like 70% via interns and another 30% via, folks on campus recruiting that go through the traditional application process. And so what I did was I had this idea. So when I graduated from Vanderbilt, I came back to Chicago and I started networking with other Vanderbilt alums. And there are 4 people from Vanderbilt that live in the city of Chicago that actually played college tennis at Vanderbilt, like I did.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. The funny thing was they're cumulatively worth, over $500 million between the 4 of them.
Wow.
And yeah, and they were all willing to take a call with me or meet with me or help me with career guidance because of, because I put Vanderbilt tennis in the subject line of my email. So what I did when I was trying to get a job in consulting was, look, well, I'm going to create actually a social network for former student athletes to network with one another. Yeah.
Sure.
So I did that, got it to Vanderbilt and Northwestern, started building and that was my search, and I kind of recruited a former co-founder who's actually my co-founder today at New Coast Anon Club to build the site. It was called Alliance, and then basically use that as a Trojan horse to say, hey, I can be a high performing person. I'm not just a tennis coach. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but here's what I do. Here's what I did on the side. I understand technology. Would you be open to giving me a job? And KPMG ultimately took a chance on me.
That's actually really good advice, right? I love how people kind of figure out alternative ways to kind of get in front of a company or somebody that they want to potentially work for or talk to or whatever, right? So I think that's really cool how you did that. And so at what point did you decide to kind of start New Coast Ventures, and what exactly is it?
Yeah. So we started New Coast about 3 years ago now, and it's a hybrid innovation studio. So what we're doing is we're actually investing in companies. I raised a small fund to do that.
Okay.
We're starting our own internal companies, our own concepts, and then we're actually a small digital agency.
Oh, okay.
So it's so we're doing those 3 things. And the first, as you know, the first company that we started out of that incubated role is Hunt Club, which is a referral recruiting platform.
Sure, and we'll get to that more in deeper later, but sure. So so what exactly, you kind of obviously just kind of gave a quick overview, but for people that don't really understand the space, what does that really mean, and what do you guys kind of walk me through the whole process of going from idea to actually kind of launching something?
Yeah, so for what that really means, if you distill it down, it's we build technology for other people that pay us as a traditional vendor.
Got you.
We build our own products and services that we think are a good idea, and then we invest money into people outside of our ecosystem that are building cool things that we believe in.
Got you. Okay, that's very cool. Keeps it fun, right?
Yeah. It's for us. If you look at a lot of the things that we're doing, it seems like they're pretty disconnected, but they're all relatively connected to some degree. So as we, build great things for clients outside of our own ecosystem, we develop relationships, we understand and learn their problems, and we can actually build technology that's under our own brand to help them solve some of those problems. So it's, a lot of people, and we talked about the next question being how to take an idea to traction,
right,
or an idea to a product, to a sale. A lot of it's contingent on understanding a customer's problem.
Sure.
And there's no better way to really understand the customer's problem than to really, work with them on something and really understand their pain point and kind of, what it is they're really looking to solve that problem.
Sure. So how do you guys decide who to work with then?
Yeah, from an entrepreneur's perspective, investing, or just from a client's perspective.
Well, almost both. I'm curious to know kind of how you guys decide that.
Yeah, so for the entrepreneurs that we back, really what we look for is kind of 2 or 3 different things. The first is someone that's gritty, that is building sort of their life's mission. And so if you think about some of some of the founders we've backed, if you look at their trajectory as a company, they probably should have shut it down at 2 or 3 times before they even come to us for funding. But they're so obsessed with solving that problem that, it's just something that they're going to figure out. So a great example of that is a guy in our portfolio named Julian from Learn Metrics. So he's been building his company for 5 years now,
Yeah.
and has it at a great point. But before that, he was, and what Learn Metrics is, it's sort of like a mint.com for education.
Oh,
So
interesting.
yeah, it's a really cool company, a really great product. So what they do actually is what he did is fascinating. So he was a teacher beforehand,
Okay.
and then and he's also a software engineer. So he basically built out this massive spreadsheet that was his platform, because he wanted a better way to understand how his students were performing.
Okay.
And so basically he took the leap of faith to start his own company, and 5 years later he's gone through a lot of twists and turns, and ed tech is a very difficult sale, but that's the type of guy that it was rooted out of something he understood really well and he was passionate about. So he's going to do what it takes to figure it out.
Sure, but I also think like that's also really good advice in itself. Like just because you know the industry and you even could have a really good product, sometimes it takes years before it catches on, right? Like so many people read online that they like launch a startup, they become a billionaire, and they live the good life. Well, it's like that. Of course, that can happen, but it can take a decade or a decade of failures to pivot into a success that you could sell for $1 million or something, right? Like, I think if you're not willing to grind it out for a number of years, you can still be successful, but it's a lot harder, at least in my experience.
Yeah. No, I think that's dead on. It's, so we've done 24 investments to date, and we've been investing for 3 years. And, all the companies that we've invested in, the companies we started internally, it always takes twice as long as you think it will, twice as much capital. So if it's not something that if you want to start a business today and you're not willing to dedicate 24 months to it before you have any sort of idea of traction, or a customer, or really, a good first version of the product, I would say don't even do it, because you're going to get to a point where, the frustration of all the barriers to get something off the ground will eventually prohibit you from actually doing it. And it's just, I like to tell everybody that we work with, and when we're starting something, this isn't a flash in the pan. Let's do everything that we can to minimize our risk, but let's understand that this is going to take 2 years before we get on a decent baseline.
Sure.
So are we really going to commit that to it?
No, that's fair. So you said kind of earlier that you're looking for people that kind of have the drive and passion to kind of stick with it long term. How do you, like, what do you look for in an individual? Because obviously, like, at some point you need to decide to take a chance on them, but what do you kind of look for? Or are there certain things that, you can recommend to people that they need to kind of work on if they don't have the skills or that you're about to mention?
Yeah, so I think it's like perpetual improvement.
Okay.
So, my take on business, right, is the things that people need to be successful in business, anyone really can do or has the qualities internally to do.
Okay.
As long as someone's willing to learn and move quickly as fast as possible. So, really what we look for is if we're talking to somebody that we're interested in and they tell us, but it's a little bit too early, or we think there might be some things that we need to flush out and figure out, or they need to figure out. What we'll say is come back to us in 3 months and let us know what you're working on and what you want to achieve in those 3 months. And so the best litmus test that I've found to really understand if someone will build, sort of what they say they can or what they want to is, really understanding what it is they're trying to do in a quarter, and seeing if they actually do it. Follow through is so important when backing a company.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense, right? It's kind of like the proof's in the pudding, right? Like whatever, like if you tell me you're going to do this, if you don't attain it, at least tell me like why you didn't attain it, right? I think that's just as important, right? Because new things could pop up. You have no idea what's going to happen, right? Like sometimes in a startup, things change weekly or sometimes if you're moving that fast, like daily, right? Which is kind of... Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, absolutely. Like, you don't have to hit everything perfectly, but if you have an understanding as to why you didn't, that shows that you have enough understanding of the game to make something successful.
Sure. So are you guys just working with kind of local Chicago-based companies, or are you guys kind of spread out across the states, or kind of how do you decide geographically where to invest?
Yeah, so we're pretty widespread.
Okay.
We've done 3 or 4 investments in San Francisco. We've done a bunch in one or two in New York. Really, primarily where we're focusing on, though, going forward is building businesses in the Midwest.
Okay.
Just because that's where we're from, that's where we're headquartered. It's where we can kind of, give certain strategic advantages. It's really kind of in our backyard, so we
Sure.
think that we can lend a hand via our network or really just kind of helping in person as much as we possibly can since it's so close.
Sure. So you mentioned you've done 24 investments. Are you guys kind of sticking in certain verticals, or does it not really matter? Or how do you guys kind of decide which kind of verticals you guys pick?
We're pretty vertical agnostic. I will
Okay.
say the last 12 months, what we've been focusing on more so are technology-enabled services and marketplaces.
Okay.
So
What does that
really,
mean for people that don't know what that means?
so I love tech-enabled services for a number of reasons. So what that means is essentially if you think about a traditional service, right? So
Mhm.
accounting, a
Okay.
bookkeeper, or consulting, or estate sales. We just invested in a company called Everything But the House that does online estate sales.
Okay. Interesting.
What it means is essentially you can take a traditional services industry and apply different pieces of technology around delivering that service to get better margins, to get certain efficiencies that a traditional services company can't. And
Sure.
so the reason why we love that model is because services generally you can start generating revenue very quickly.
Sure.
So, and obviously, as a business or as an early stage company, revenue allows you to cure some of the other pain points of maybe missing targets or other types of hiccups. So we really love that model. We think it's a great model to building a successful business in the Midwest. So I think, and especially with a lot of the distraction today in technology where people are launching things every single day, it's getting increasingly more difficult to actually get someone's attention to buy your product. So I think building a services component first and then building technology to amplify that service is a model we love here.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of, it seems to be the next kind of big trend is kind of maybe you still, yes, build a tech web mobile component, all of them, hardware integration, whatever, but actually going back into kind of the physical world and then bringing technology into it, like you just mentioned, right? Like
Yeah.
with that startup, with the estate sales, like that totally makes a lot of sense, right? And Amazon's even doing that now with their little like Go pop up like little grocery stores, right? Which so like I
Mm-hmm.
think big companies are starting to do it as well, and I think you're right. Like you guys are in this kind of up and coming sector that makes a lot of sense, right? And so I think for anybody listening that you guys are kind of if that's what they're looking to do and you guys are building tons of these, like you guys have been through a bunch of these now, you're working through a bunch of these now, just having somebody that understands kind of the struggles that come along with trying to bring technology into something that maybe an industry that doesn't necessarily known for being technical, right? Or having technology in it, really.
Definitely. Definitely. I think it's one of the reasons I'm excited about the Midwest too. Because if
Sure.
you think about the Midwest, what we have is quite a bit of the Fortune 500 here,
Mm-hmm.
a very large services component, but not a lot of huge tech company acquirers. So
Right.
we don't have Google, Facebook, Amazon, anyone really headquartered here. So it's the types of things that work here. I think are a little bit different than that work in other regions, either on either coast. So I think it's one reason why we focus in that sector because it's a very, very, very big services market. And I think focusing on that allows, the folks that we back or the things that we build to get traction quicker.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I also kind of like that you guys are basically you understand kind of what works in your market, right? And you're kind of going after that, right? Because yeah, you could probably create like a Silicon Valley stereotypical startup, but you're right. Like if you don't have big companies around you like Google or something to potentially work with or buy, like it's a lot harder. It can happen, but it's harder, right? And sometimes it doesn't make
Mm-hmm.
sense to do something that just makes it a lot harder on the company, right?
Totally. And I liken it. I use this analogy for a lot of the companies that we talk to or look at. It's like they call it the Orange Grove analysis.
Okay.
Whereas like you wouldn't start an orange grove in Chicago or the Midwest or really any type of farming business that relies on warmer weather because it will die.
Sure.
So it's really focusing I think on the things that your ecosystem or whatever market you're in can provide strengths to will give you a leg up. And I think it's something that, I've learned the hard way a couple times and I've also watched happen here a bunch.
Sure. I think that's a really good way of putting it. I've never heard that before, but I think that's actually a really good way to put it, right? So I'm curious, you're also CEO of Hunt Club. What exactly is Hunt Club? And why'd you guys decide to kind of launch that as your first product under New Coast Ventures?
Yeah, so Hunt Clubs, it's a referral technology service. So the whole idea is instead of using a traditional external headhunter or recruiter, leverage a network of well-connected people to refer for open positions. And so it all started about, I think, 2.5 years ago. I just found myself constantly referring people for jobs.
Sure.
So recruiters would ask me, hey, do you know anybody or do you know this person? And I would say, sure, Tim, meet recruiter X, so on and so forth. And then I did this, 9 or 10 times. And then ultimately what I was finding out is the recruiter would take that person through my relationship for social capital and make tens of thousands of dollars placing them in a new role. And so I started studying the industry a little bit more and started looking at some of the best recruiters. So think of like executive recruiters at large firms.
Yep.
And what they do is they talk to, they call them sources, but they talk to, if you're a CMO recruiter, they talk to other CMOs all day, every day, and ask them, who's in market? Are you interested? Are you interested in this role? If not, who's in market? Who do you know? Who do you like?
Yep.
And so I thought to myself, that's a really inefficient process
Sure.
for two reasons. The first is it's not incentivizing everyone involved. The second is, they're just dialing and hitting the phones all day. So I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way to improve that. So that's why we built Hunt Club.
Interesting. Okay, so how exactly does it work if I'm kind of a recruiter?
Yeah, so it's if you're a recruiter on our team, so we call them account executives, but
okay,
basically what we do is we partner with a lot of different types of companies, so large public companies to growth companies. Some of our biggest customers are, folks that are hiring for 50 to 60 roles a year. And what we do is we partner with them. We understand like exactly what the roles that they want to place are, who they are, and what they're looking for.
Okay.
And then we leverage our platform to generate referrals for those positions. So think of it, if we're doing a VP of marketing, we've got a network of over probably a couple 100,000 potential referrals for marketers.
Sure.
that we can essentially tap into. And so as referrals come back, our services team screens those referrals, make sure that, and sort of soft sells them, make sure that they're interested, make sure that they're good and kind of fit the spec, and then sends them to a company and then works with them, with that hiring manager from start to close.
Got you. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So if I'm an influencer, how do I kind of put my network out there and start referring people?
Yeah, so we do it two ways an influencer can refer. The first is when you sign up, you can drop your network in via an Excel spreadsheet, and so it's super seamless. It takes about 2 seconds.
Okay.
And then there's really two ways for an influencer to refer. The first is that our platform will send you recommendations of who in your network might be a great fit for a role.
Okay.
And so all you have to do there is really click a button and say, yes, this person's great. Feel free to reach out on my behalf. The other way is we built basically a job board internally for all influencers. So as, Kevin, you're out and having a coffee meeting with someone or a drink or something along those lines, they tell you I may be looking for what's next. You can actually go on mobile and see, what roles are open and refer them directly via there. So it's really a push and a pull sort of methodology.
Got you. Okay. So how does that kind of from a privacy side of things, how does that kind of work when I'm I think, oh, this person could be really good for a role. I reach out, I guess, how much access do you have to my just randomly contact people? It sounds like I have to approve everybody that you guys reach out to on my behalf.
Absolutely. So that's exactly right. And that's sort of the Hunt Club promise is we never reach out to anybody or use anybody's social capital unless one of our influencers refers them or gives us permission.
Gotcha.
So that point is so important to us because you see so many bad actors in the recruiting space,
sure.
Loosely using other people's names or reaching out without really getting clearance. And it's, something that we want to build from the start is a great community of trust with our influencers.
Sure. So for for people that don't really maybe have never heard of Hunt Club, like kind of walk me through. So I refer a buddy, he gets a job at this company. What
hmm
happens?
Yeah. So what happens is then you'd be eligible for a pay it forward reward. We call it a pay it forward reward, and it's anywhere between $2,000 to $5,000 actually for that referral, and it depends on what level of the role it is. So for some of our executive roles, the fee structure goes up, so the pay it forward reward goes up. For more of our mid market or entry level roles, it's a lower value. So
Okay.
literally, you refer your friends. If you ever want to check in on how that referral is going, you can log into the dashboard and check, or you can contact someone on our services team, and then from there, it's out of your hands. If they get the role, you'll get a check from us within 60 to 90 days after they take the position.
Got you. And then I'm assuming you guys monetize by taking a cut of that referral if that happens, or how do you guys monetize this?
Exactly right. So we operate traditionally in a similar business model to a lot of firms. And so firms generally do two types of models, either a contingent, so I don't pay you anything unless you place a role, or a consulting model. So it's you're going to pay me regardless if you place the role. We don't think those are the best models. So what we do is a shared risk model.
Okay.
So you'll pay a very little upfront to start working with Hunt Club, and then a lot more if we're successful.
Gotcha.
And then we take a piece of that and distribute the rest to influencers.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting because I think you're right, to your point, like a little while ago, that the industry is kind of broken, right? And I like companies that are trying to fix that, like what you guys are doing, because you're right, they just kind of cold call or cold email all day long, right? And reach out to people all the time just saying, like, do you know somebody for this? And it's like, well, it's interesting, right? Because some people find that kind of super annoying. Like you'll see on like LinkedIn, this is like, recruiters do not contact me, right? But if like a
Right.
friend sends them saying like, hey man, like I think you'd be really good for this, and especially if you know the company or know the person that you're connecting, it could be really beneficial.
Totally. And I think you hit on like a really, really important point of what the value of what we're doing is a lot of really amazing opportunities actually get lost because of who packages and presents it to a candidate or a person.
Fair enough.
So what Hunt Club does is really kind of take the power of almost like a team sport in recruiting, where someone may not be looking, but if the right opportunity comes across their desk from the right person that they trust, and it is that right opportunity, we don't want those folks to miss out on it. So I think really it's how do we get the best people referring the best people for things that are important and relevant to them.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. So you were also named a Forbes 30 under 30. Kind of how did that come about, and why did Forbes select you? Like it's kind of obvious, but I think like I'm kind of curious. Walk me through that whole process.
Yeah. It was I was honored to get it. It's an amazing reward, especially in the category I was in.
Sure.
But really, I got nominated by a couple folks that we do business with, that are friends.
Okay.
And from there, it really was just filling out an application and having a few phone calls and interviews, and got the award a couple months later. So it was a really straightforward process, and I think it helps that I was nominated by a couple folks that had received it in the past.
Okay. So Forbes calls you and kind of gives you asks you a bunch of questions. Like how does that what do they kind of ask you, I guess?
Yeah, they really want to dig into, why you started your business, who you are, what you're doing, what your plans are for growth, what your big picture vision is. And then they dig into some of the more tactical of, how many people currently work at your company, some thoughts around revenue numbers or where you can be in the next year, what your goals are from a financial perspective. And so you think of it as really doing a great job of digging through and understanding the why you're doing what you're doing, and then also digging into to a bit the how you're doing it.
Got you. Okay. And then so like they selected you, and then what happens? Do you have to go fly to their office, or like what is that kind of when they actually give you the award?
Yeah, so it's published in a magazine, and then there's a couple really cool events that they put on. So I got to go to Boston this year,
Okay.
where their annual Forbes 30 to under 30 event is, and all the folks that are awarded actually meet up there for about 4 to 5 days for, really amazing speaker conferences. So I got to hear Richard Branson speak. I got to
Very
hear Ashton Kutcher speak, and then networking events, concerts, great food events. So it's basically they put on an amazing 4 to 5 days where you can really, get to know other folks that were in the cohort of award winners, and then really learn a bunch of great content.
Sure. So how many people do they kind of pick every year? Do you know?
I think there is a total of somewhere between 400 to 500. I believe there's around 10 plus categories. So they do marketing and advertising. They do, social impact. They do investing. They do manufacturing. So they basically select, I think it's 10 to 12 categories, and then they pick around 15 to 20 people in each category. So I think it's a great question. I don't actually know. I think it's somewhere between 300 to 500 though.
Which is actually that's not that many people. Like if you take into account like how many people are working and that they could have in the magazine, like that's quite an honor for you to be picked in that, right?
Oh yeah, I appreciate it, man. I got lucky.
Yeah, but I like to say it's like created luck. I think everybody that's been successful, like there's some luck involved, but like I think you need to keep trying at it until like eventually something lucky will happen to you, right? And sometimes it takes a year, sometimes it takes a decade, and you have no idea.
I think, luck favors those who never quit or give up on something.
Totally.
and care very deeply about it. So it's, I think what I really try and do with our team and with our customers who work with us is try and really let them know how passionate we are about either helping their business or how passionate about it we are about like building, the future of sort of entrepreneurs and leaders internally. So I think it's, as long as you're aligned with what you're doing and you have passion about it, I think it's ultimately at some point you will be successful if you don't stop trying.
Sure. And I think, but you're also helping people find and build their own dreams, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's when we take someone and work with them on their dream product or idea, it's really enriching and rewarding.
Sure. So what's kind of next for you? You're doing New Coast Ventures, you're doing Hunt Club. Like, obviously you're going to still keep working on those, but is there anything else that you're looking at kind of doing in 2017, or you're just going to kind of keep focusing on what you've been doing?
2017, if we do it correctly, will grow dramatically in each business line.
Okay.
We'll probably invest in another 4 to 6 companies, and then we're looking to start 2 new companies actually internally.
Very cool. So you're going to be busy.
yeah. I need to. Yeah, I'm getting married in April too. So
congrats, man.
That's the equation.
That's great.
Thank
yeah,
you. So it's
yeah, you got a lot on your plate, but it's good, man, right? Like you're keeping busy, and you never know where things go, right?
That's right.
So I'm curious, just kind of, we're coming to the end of the show. Is there any companies that you guys are maybe, if somebody, you're like, I really want to potentially work with a company in like X vertical, is there a thing, or do you not really think like that?
I love unsexy industries. I love companies and industries that have never really thought about using technology before in a way that could help their business. So I think some of the companies that I admire in spaces that I'm interested, or at least in areas I'm interested in, are, I don't know if you've ever heard of Rubicon Global.
Yeah.
They're building some incredible stuff in the waste management and in the recycling space.
Yep.
5 years ago, someone would call you crazy if you wanted to build a tech-enabled service around waste management, right? So
Sure.
Everything But the House is building an amazing estate sale marketplace using technology to facilitate the whole process. So they're, literally you can sell everything in your home with one service provider, which is incredible for a number of different ways in that market. So I think it's what we're really interested in the future is, in Hunt Club is tackling a market where, every single recruiter pretty much in every firm has used the same technology for multiple decades, with the exception of LinkedIn.
Oh.
So it's really spaces that haven't really been touched or thought about using technology is really what I'm interested in.
Sure, but you touched on something great. Like, I think there's a lot of money in the non-sexy industries bringing technology into them, right? Like the chances of you creating the next Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or something, like obviously it can happen, but like you can make a very good living or like an extremely good living, like building something in kind of a non-traditional sexy industry, right? And I think sometimes people forget about that, right? And there's a lot of big problems to solve in, kind of non-tech kind of spaces, right? And bringing technology into them.
Absolutely. I think, you think about all the Snapchats, Facebooks, Amazons, Googles of the world, right?
Yep.
There's a handful of those. And then you think about not to say that we're trying to build small businesses here. We're going after really big markets. But, if you think about the millions of small business owners that are creating and generating massive amounts of income, creating jobs and building great lifestyles, like I think it's approaching it that way and then scaling with capital, I think is an amazing way to think about building a business, just because you've already proven it works. You've proven you've got a customer base, and now you're going out and raising venture funding just to grow the hell out of it. So it's, I think it goes back to, I think whatever works for the entrepreneur, but I always found I was better at building businesses when I had a customer when I first started.
Oh, that totally makes sense. But sadly, Nick, we're coming to the end of the show. So let's close with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself, New Coast Ventures, and Hunt Club.
Yeah. So you can check out www.newcoastventures.com and then www.huntclub.co. That's .co. And if you're ever in Chicago, we're based here. Would love to meet anybody.
Perfect, man. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time into your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Perfect, man. Have a good one.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check them out at electricmantra.com and keep them for the future.